Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boston and Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Hope everybody's having a great start to the week. It's been a little while since I dropped an episode for all of you. Been a really busy couple of weeks, but a fun couple of weeks. I was actually at the Big E this past weekend with some of my friends, so that was a good time. It's always fun there. It was actually not overly crowded this past weekend, which was really good because that's what we were hoping for. So it was overall a good experience. Hope you all had a great weekend. I'm definitely excited to bring you another episode. I have a really interesting guest with me on this episode. He is the CEO and actually one of the founders of the New England Free Jacks of Major League Rugby out of the Boston area. Alex Magleby, how are you doing today?
Gabby, I'm awesome. How are you?
Good. I appreciate you hopping on my show with me.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Super excited. We get to talk about Free Jacks and all things great in New England. How cool is that?
Yeah, no, it is pretty cool. Yeah, I actually shout out to my friend Sean, a mutual friend that we both know that was able to get us connected. He's a great guy. So if you're listening, Sean, shout out to you.
Shout out Sean. He's one of our season members. I think he's even a founding member. He's awesome. That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I definitely look forward to kind of hearing more from you. So just in general, can you just talk a little bit about how the Free Jacks got started, founded, how the whole thing really came about?
Yeah. So, are you familiar with Major League Rugby?
Yes.
So, it's a new concept, 2017. It's kind of the one major world sport that had yet to be professionalized in North America. And a bunch of the original kind of amateur clubs. There's a lot of history of rugby in this country, but it's always kind of prided itself on amateurism. But what's changed probably in the last 20 years, you now have a scholastic model. Kids are playing, they're going to varsity college programs because they're good students and they're good at rugby. The game globally has gone professional. Again, globally, it always provided was always proud of its kind of amateurism. And it wasn't until the mid 90s, the 1995 South African World Cup, that Nelson Mandela used to kind of unite a country, that the game started to go professional. Prior to that, people had just been paid under the table, but they were carpenters and attorneys and they had day jobs. So the game itself, even though it's existed for so long and has had a massive tradition and a great following, has always been amateur, again, until the mid 90s. And here in the United States, 20 years later, we still hadn't really professionalized the game at the top level. And so it was a missing piece, to feed into our national teams and, both the U.S. and Canada, is a professional league that really shares this great game, here in the United States. And so with the Free Jacks, we came into the league a year after it started. And we're like, this is actually a really good model. At the time, I was the general manager for USA Rugby, having previously been the head coach and a former player. And then at that stage, kind of running the business side of the performance game in the US. And it was a missing piece. And we said, you know what? We really want to be a part of this. We want to burn it locally here in New England. And it's an opportunity for us to share the game with a much bigger audience. So by the fall of 2018, we became full members in Major League Rugby. We then started competing in an exhibition season in 2019, and we did that with a lot of our friends from Ireland. So we brought the 4 provinces over from Ireland and played in what was the Cara Cup, and we tested out a bunch of different small stadiums in the greater Boston area to see what was going to be the right fit. And then 2020 was our inaugural year, and with COVID, we were on the road for the first 5 weeks, and we were about to be at home. It was a sellout crowd down in Weymouth, and we had to pull the plug for that season. But that's kind of how we started. And then by 2021, we were full go. And then 2022 was our first season in our home in Quincy at Veterans Memorial Stadium.
That's so exciting. Yeah, it must have been so cool to kind of see it really come to fruition and really build up the program.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. Like it's a startup in sports entertainment and rugby, and everybody though has a rugby story somehow. It seems it's whether people saw it in college or played in college, they went overseas and saw the Hong Kong Sevens, or they were in Europe and they saw the Six Nations, or they have a friend of a friend who played, but suddenly they start, wait a minute, I kind of know this game, and even though I've never been exposed to it, I understand American sports. It's a give and go in basketball with the contact of football. With some territory play like soccer, you can kick, you can run, you can tackle. So everybody's like, oh, I actually understand this game more than I thought. And it's been really cool to see when we started, 90% of our supporters had been really kind of diehard rugby folks. And now, that's probably less than 50% as we continue to grow and bring new people into our experiences at the Free Jacks, which has been really, really fun to see.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. And you mentioned the COVID year. I mean, that was so challenging for sports in general, just, not being able to have sports even for a while at all. And then when they did resume, people weren't able to go to games. So sports in general definitely just lost a lot of revenue during that season. So what did you find were some of the biggest challenges that came with that and being able to recover from that season?
Yeah, so Major League Rugby was one of the first leagues to actually suspend and cancel the season. We're kind of at the front of that wave in early March of 2020. And what we did as owners, we just wanted to make sure that we made sure our players were whole. The first priority, can we make sure that we have the capital to ensure that their contracts are whole and they can continue to get paid even though they're not playing? That was an important piece to us for our long-term success, right? And the players are the key to making this whole thing work. So we were able to do that. So that was kind of step one, regardless if we can have a season in 3 months or 6 months, or it may not be for another 18 months. But let's just make sure that we're honoring those contracts. And then locally, we had to really revive what we were thinking about, revise our mindset, where we're pretty much a live events company, and not being able to be live and have tickets and sponsorship activations and this really, really fun fan experience. We had to go virtual, which really challenged us, but made us an infinitely better organization because we were able to do our academy virtually. We were able to teach people, through partnerships with the Boys and Girls Clubs and other partnerships. You don't need a rugby ball. You could have a roll of toilet paper and you could still, funny enough, in the pandemic, that was probably not something people had, but you could have another soccer ball and we'll still teach you rugby. And we had a bunch of signups. We were able to do that. And we were able to learn that actually there's a lot of means by which we can use to expand and share the game. And so awful time, but it really made us a much better company because of that.
Yeah, it's crazy to look back on that year and just think about just how much people really took advantage of prior to the pandemic. And then we're looking back on it now and it's like, wow, we really grew in general from all of that. And in certain areas, it's just crazy that, the whole virtual thing was just not a huge concept before 2020.
Yeah, 100%. And we pride ourselves on, we're going to have the best 2 hours that any fan's going to have. It's an awesome experience. But that was live, and that was like our whole mindset. And then the ability to then say, you know what, we're actually going to share that same feeling digitally, whether it's 30 seconds a day or 10 minutes a day throughout the pandemic. And that made us really shift our mindset, but also made us realize that there's a lot more potential for how we can share this great game and the Free Jacks experience, which was really cool.
Yeah. No, that is really cool. I mean, just definitely a crazy time. Definitely a crazy time. I think we all came out stronger after that, though. But yeah. So I know this is kind of a different process for every sport, but what's kind of your process in terms of attracting players to your program, making them feel like the Free Jacks are where I want to play?
Yeah. So how familiar are you with rugby, just in general?
A little bit.
Okay, so it is a global game, right? It's played in English-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, the world over, Spanish-speaking countries. You're in South America, there's great rugby. You're in Africa, there's great rugby. You're in Asia, there's great rugby. You're in Europe, there's great rugby. So multiple countries play this game. It's an Olympic sport. That's the sevens version. That's like a shortened version of the game. And then 15s is the traditional version of the game. And the World Cup, the Women's World Cup just kicks off now. And the Men's World Cup, the United States will be hosting both of those. So 2031 will host the Men's World Cup, and 2033 will host the Women's World Cup. So it's this really cool package that we have to build up to with MLR and all the other things we're doing to build into that. The Men's World Cup is the third largest sporting event in the world. There's more people that attend those actual matches than they do the Soccer World Cup. Soccer World Cup just has more volume, more matches. But it's a massive endeavor because it is the global contact game. It's an awesome game and an awesome experience. So with the Free Jacks, we benefit from the fact that this is a global game. We have people learning the game in the United States and playing, with the scholastic model. They learn, they play in high school, they play in college. Some enter into the game in college, like crossover athletes, some who, were pros in other sports, then even enter in after that. So we have that pathway, which is really cool. And that's getting a lot stronger. But then we also have all the pathways from all the other countries. And you think about like baseball and the Red Sox, and there's the academy and the Dominican and the Japanese leagues, and there's a few countries that are really into baseball, but it's not nearly as the world over. Probably the better comparison would be basketball, and you see just the diversity of international players coming to the NBA now. Rugby's always been like that. And so we have this massive advantage that we can kind of pick the best of the best. And in some cases, when they're younger, upcoming in their country systems, they can come to the United States for a bit, have this great professional experience here, then go back and kind of play for their national team in Ireland or whatever the case may be. So there's a plethora of really awesome talent that we get to bring to the Boston area and share the great game with. So depending on the year, we have anywhere between 10 to 15 different countries, with a lot of Americans and a lot of Canadians making up the majority, but there's certainly a lot of other countries involved. So that's really cool. And we have scouts throughout the world, and that it's fun to try to find the needles in the haystack in that situation.
Yeah, that's super cool. With it being a global sport and being able to, that just expands the talent pool so much more. You're so far less limited in terms of where you can get the talent from. So I feel like all of these players who, really grew up loving the game and playing the game, you're getting them from really all over the place. And you do bring up a good point with basketball, because that's just becoming so much more diverse from that standpoint, in terms of you're seeing all these players from, other countries that are coming to play basketball here in the US. And you see, how passionate they are about the game in their countries too. But the fact that rugby is just so broad and so diverse, I feel like is just really, really cool from that standpoint, because it must be so cool to be able to just see all of that talent that you have coming in, and just people being good in different aspects of the game and just what they're passionate about, and just how many different types of people that you're able to really interact with that come through the program.
Yeah, 100%. And that's awesome. And then they make us a better organization, because they're bringing their ideas from their worlds, and sharing that with their teammates and with the front office and with our fans and supporters. And so that certainly becomes a really cool mix that becomes exponential, and it grows on itself. So it's really cool to have the diversity of thought and ideas a part of our organization.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I've always been curious about kind of just what that process must be like in terms of expanding your interest to different talent all over the place, because that definitely probably comes with challenges too.
Yeah, and but you also have to look, like, just in terms of the teaching, like, how you work with the players, and the other piece of it, people come from a lot of different education systems, and they come from a lot of different family situations, and some are very much, the kids are very open in communication with parents or adult figures, and some come from societies where it's much more structured. And or it's more religious, or whatever the case may be. So it's been really interesting for our staff, and who are also very international, and a great domestic group too, learning how to work with and bring together all these different ways that people are learning and communicating, and different languages, and really bringing that melting pot together to be successful, right? And that's been really, really cool to see. But it's a challenge, because it's not homogeneous, and everybody's from the same area, and they all kind of are used to the same educational systems, and so that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, culturally, there's just so many differences, and being able to learn about other people's cultures and just where they came from is definitely probably a rewarding thing as well. Just being able to have those types of interactions, because everybody's story is different, and where they came from is different. And I feel like this is one of those sports where you just really get more of that than you do in a lot of other sports.
Yeah, completely. And that's why, rugby has this great tradition. After you play the games, you sit down and you eat together with the opposition, and you break bread together. So food becomes this important part of how everybody connects. And so that's like in the post match, and you're connecting with people from the teams and everything else. But even the team itself, they all come from different cultures. They have different ways of doing barbecue, and that you have to do a hungy or a braai, and we go through the different barbecues even of where the different players are coming from, which is really cool for the rest of us because we get to enjoy great food. But yeah.
Cool. No, that's a cool tradition to have too, though, because how often can you say that they do that in sports? They really don't, So that's something that everybody gets to share together, and you really just get to know other people.
Yeah, which is very cool.
And share the same passion for the sport.
Yeah, 100%. I think that rugby has that still to its credit. It's the sportsmanship above everything else. And it's a game. It's fierce. If you've seen it, it's a great game to play, but it's also a great game to watch. It's physical. It's fast. There's all these pieces to it. There's tactical elements. There's strategy, but really at the end of it, it's still a sport. It's still game, and we still shake hands and we sit down together, and we celebrate the fact that we had a fierce competition together, and that's super cool. And I think that's a great education for future kids as well.
Yeah, and I feel like this is, a great opportunity to be able to continue to grow the sport in this country because, obviously it's really, really big in other countries. And I feel like now, like you talked about a little bit earlier, you're in a time now where this is such a great opportunity to just expand the interest of the sport to younger kids who might be wanting to get into it at a young age, and just kind of continuing to expand that interest overall among, players and fans within the U.S.
Yeah. What sports did you play growing up?
Soccer, softball, basketball. I was a runner. I ran cross country and track.
Okay, awesome. So you like pain.
Yeah. Every time I was in a cross country meet, I would be like, why do I do this to myself? This is not fun at all. Like running is not fun.
Yeah, so you think about rugby came from soccer originally, and you have some of those elements still. You have the kicking, you have the territory, you have the give and go type of situations. You also have the build up to the score, which is very cool about soccer is that there's not a lot of necessarily scores every second, and it's this great build up, and which is really cool. And you have that element in rugby, which is neat. But there really is a position on the field for kind of every athlete type. And the cool thing about rugby is that there are positions where you don't have to be the most gifted athlete to be successful. It just requires a certain amount of work, ethic, and other things to eventually get successful in that position, and different sizes. And that's a really cool thing about the game is it's still accessible in that way. And it's not just, okay, you hit puberty first, you're the best athlete, so therefore you're going to be able to continue down this path in this sport. It's actually, well, there's another position for you, which is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool because in certain sports, you really do have to have a certain type of, athleticism or build to be successful in certain sports. So that's really cool that everybody who's interested in playing the sport, there's just something for everybody. I feel like that's what probably makes it so unique and makes it such an interesting sport to be able to be a part of.
Yeah, 100%.
From a longevity standpoint, because obviously this is something that varies in different sports too. So from a longevity standpoint, how long typically does somebody's rugby career last at the professional level?
Yeah, so it depends on the position, right? If you're a prop, it's the equivalent to in football. Think about like a guard or a tackle. In fact, American football comes from the old rugby. So a center in football is what's called a hooker in rugby. The props effectively became the guards in football. The locks became the tackles. All that the difference between a rugby scrum originally and then the scrimmage line in football was just flattening the scrum into a wall versus a wall, as opposed to call it a ball versus a ball, right? A mass of people in the scrum, and it became the scrummage line, which became the scrimmage line. So the players in rugby who are like the guards and tackles, but in rugby they're a lot more. They can't be nearly as heavy because they have to carry that load for a 30 to 45 second burst for 80 minutes, right? But those players typically who become really, really good in the scrum, they may not peak until they're 30, 31. It's because it requires a lot of technical abilities, to be really astute. It's kind of they call it the dark arts of the sport as the scrum. And there's some speed positions out wide, wings, that typically peak in their mid to late 20s, right, where the speed is just paramount, as you see with other sports where speed is the dominant piece. Now that the game is so professionalized and you have also international rugby on top of that. So you remember, if you're the best player right now in France, you play for your club, call it, Stade France or something, and you make really good money doing that. But you're playing for your club 8 months of the year, and then the other 3 months of the year, you're playing international and you kind of have 1 month off. And so it's this really heavy load. Probably too much, I would think, for some of our players. Should probably be playing more like 20 matches a year, and some of them are playing closer to 30 plus matches a year. Just a combination of international and club, kind of similar to you see in soccer. So the ages of which people are playing is, it's all dependent on the volume by which the number of matches they're actually having to play or choosing to play.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And, obviously certain positions are probably more intense than others. And it's always hard to see in certain sports. Obviously injuries are always a factor too, in somebody's career being cut short because of an injury. And I feel like certain positions, you're more likely to get injured than you are in others too. And so you see sometimes that certain positions, those types of players don't always, last as long in their certain sport.
Yeah, I grew up playing a very traditional American kind of sports landscape. American football in the fall. I wrestled and played basketball in the winter. But where I grew up, we also had rugby in the spring, so I was able to play rugby as a kid. So really, my two favorite sports growing up, through high school, were football and rugby. I love football, and I still love football. But the physical toll of football was much more injuries that your head's ringing, your shoulder can't move. Rugby, I found my injuries were more stitches, bruises, because the way the rules of the game are such that, like, if I make a tackle right now, I have to wrap the person up. If I take them off the ground, I have to put them to the ground safely. I can't tackle above the shoulder line. I can't, horse collar. As we saw with the Patriots situation this weekend. So you can't lead with the head, all those things, right? The tackle environment is infinitely more controlled in rugby. You still get big hits, but it's, again, I'm wrapping you up as opposed to anything else. Plus, you don't have the moral hazard of the equipment. Like when I, growing up, I had a helmet on and everything else. I felt like I was totally safe, and in fact, I probably wasn't. But you feel like you are. It's one of those situations. Nate, who's one of our owners, Nate Ebner, you see over my shoulder. He's an Olympian in rugby. He came up through our U.S. age grade systems in rugby. Walk on at Ohio State football. Made his way into the Patriots and had an all-pro career. But Nate talks about that often. Is just they're both really physically taxing games. I guess the football toll though is just so acute. Right, it's just so intense. Especially with native special teams running 80 yards downfield and trying to cut an angle, and doing that while you're getting hit by another human who's 300 pounds is the momentum that's created is significantly greater than probably what you see in rugby in that regard.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. What was it like for you kind of making that transition from player to, the coaching side to the role that you're in now?
Yeah, so I was in this really interesting time period for rugby in this country. And I grew up playing in high school, which wasn't that common in the kind of early mid 90s. The game, as we said, went professional globally in the mid 90s. And that was kind of when I was graduating from high school. And I got into a bunch of schools that I had applied to, and I was deciding what sport I was going to continue on, if at all, including football and also rugby. I came out east for college, and I'm going to Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, who so happened to have this great legacy of rugby. I didn't know that when I had applied. I just really liked their engineering school. It felt like where I'd grown up. I could go mountain biking and ski and all the things that I like to do. But then I found out when I was there on campus that there actually is a great legacy of rugby on the campus. I met some people, started playing then with Dartmouth, because instantly you have 50 good buddies from around the world. Again, it's this global game, totally diverse socioeconomically, geography wise, and everything else, which was really cool. So I was playing rugby in the late 90s in the university system here in the United States. And then that's when the game started to get more serious in the US. The national team was competing for a World Cup in 99. So before I graduated from college, I'd actually been selected to play for the U.S., to play on the sevens team. That's the Olympic version of the sport. And it was our senior, party weekend. And basically I'm lifting and running and getting on a flight to go to play in Paris, which was absurd, which was awesome. But you give and take. And so then I kind of had a career then spelled out for me for at least the next couple of years to chase this game, because it's an opportunity very few people got. So I ended up playing in New Zealand. I played throughout the world and continued to play for the U.S. in both 15s and 7s. And at the time, then what you started to see on the campuses back in the United States is the professionalization of coaching. Suddenly it was like, well, let's make sure this is a safe environment for our student athletes. Let's make sure there's an athletic trainer. Let's make sure they have coaching that can kind of build structure so that it's not just treated like another sorority or fraternity. So you started to see that change happen. That happened to be when I was kind of in my wheelhouse of peaking as a player. So 6 months a year I could play, 6 months a year I could coach. So I started coaching. And so I was lucky to be a part of the first real professional era of coaches in the United States. But at the time, I was not going to create wealth that way or anything else. It was just super fun. So I started a software analytics company because it was really hard to get assessments about what was happening on the field. This is the time kind of before pre-Moneyball, that early 2000s. And that's really how I kind of built my career, was in analytics, that then helped me become a better coach. And that just kept growing and growing. And eventually I started coaching the national team, coaching my alma mater here at Dartmouth College for a long time. And then the life of a coach is a challenging one. And I felt like I had kind of lived that life, and I'd been on the road for 11 months of the year and recently married. And my wife at the time was going through med school, and we wanted, top priority for us was to have a great life and have a family, and so we decided that I'd probably step away from the coaching element and continue down the entrepreneurial path. As I'm doing that, I got asked to come back to USA Rugby to help out with a few things. That ended up going and evolving into kind of basically leading that side of the business, the performance side of the business. So anywhere from what are the competition pathways to get into the national teams or to the age grade national teams? How do I become an Olympian? To overseeing those programs for both our men's and women's Olympic teams and men's and women's World Cup 15s teams. And so I kind of ran that for a whole host of years as the game continued to grow. So it was really cool.
Wow, that's a really cool story. So you've definitely seen a lot of different sides of the game, different aspects of the game, I'm sure, and you've been through a lot of kind of the challenges that come with the game too, from different standpoints. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been. I've been very lucky to have been exposed to the sport as a young age, where a lot of people don't get that chance or didn't at the time. To being a part of the actual professionalization. So a macro thing was happening that had nothing to do with me, but I was certainly there to take advantage of it. That's for sure. And it's a great game, and people ask, why do you keep coming back to it? It's like, because rugby is just fun. It's just, the people are amazing. It doesn't matter the whatever political side you are of the spectrum or anything else. The game is very, it's a great leveler. Like, it's just an awesome leveler in that way.
Yeah, because there are other sports that are becoming political now too. So that's definitely frustrating, because that's not really what sports are supposed to be for. So that's definitely good that it's not like that.
Always been, if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to make this work, there's a place for everybody. It's home for everybody, and we're not going to discriminate on any really level, as long as you're willing to be a part of the team, and the team is above all else. Probably to its detriment. I think if you're talking about from an entertainment point of view, what we do in the United States very well with our sports entertainment products is we sell the hero, we sell the star. Rugby is great because you can see people's faces, which is awesome, and you can kind of get connected to the person that way. But historically, it very much was a sport that poo-pooed the celebration of one individual over the team. And you see that in hockey a bit, but hockey obviously had the Bobby Orrs of the world and everything else that kind of pulled the game that way. But, very much team over everything else. It's only been recently that we got permission here in Major League Rugby to put names on the jerseys of our players from World Rugby. Yeah, it's rugby is, every position has a number. So every prop is, if you're a loose head prop, you wear number 1. And if you're the hooker, you wear number 2. And then the reserves, there's only 8 reserves. They're 16 through 23. So the position is the number. And so you're just a cog basically in that whole system. But we've really pushed hard in the MLR to be like, we can still be connected to those values, and those are still paramount. But we also want to be able to share the stories of these great athletes and characters with our future audiences, and knowing somebody's name is the first step in that. It's if we were having this podcast and we didn't know each other's names, and there would still at the very beginning that wall would be there and it would remain there. So let's make that as easy as possible for people to understand. Oh, that is Kyle. Okay, now I understand who that is because I've heard this other story, but now I can actually, the face matches the name, matches the story, and I can follow their great deeds through the sport and off the field, which is really important to us. So just going back to that, that's always been the history of rugby, to, again, sometimes its own detriment.
Yeah, it's so important, I feel like, to be able to personalize that for fans, because if you're a fan watching a game, you like to, have certain players that you enjoy watching, and you want to be able to connect with those players and say, yeah, this is my favorite, basketball player, or this specific person is who I really enjoy watching. So I feel like it creates that more personal connection between the fans and the players if they are able to identify them and know their names. I feel like that's so important.
Yeah, and the number doesn't go to the player, which makes that even harder. So even if you look at the USCs of the world, Notre Dames of the world, no name, Penn State's of the world, no name on the player's back.
Yeah.
That player carries that same number throughout the year, whether they're playing in one game, outside linebacker, inside linebacker. You still know who that player is because they have that number. They're number 44. Where in rugby, one weekend I may be starting as an open side flanker. That means I'm wearing the number 7, but the next week I'm starting at the blind side flanker, which means I'm wearing the number 6. So we've got to make sure that then we're definitely putting the names and making it clear that who this person is, right? You're exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's so true. What kind of challenges did you face from a coaching standpoint that you didn't really see as a player? What kind of extra challenges did that being in that role present to you?
I think when you're a player, you have the camaraderie of the team, and that is super energizing. That is also, there's people there to kind of pick you up when you're down, when you make mistakes. There's encouragement. The life of a coach can be very isolating. You also don't have that we are working together up through something and then we actually get to perform. And regardless of the performance, we kind of get to walk away and catch our breath and recover to prepare for the next performance. Where the life of the coach, I found, amazing as it is, because you get to work with these, students or athletes and see their growth. That's fantastic. And I love that. But the hard part for me is when I was a young coach was then going into those preparing for the performances. You're not actually performing and you don't get that release. There's no emotional release. And then you're straight into preparing for the next performance, but you never got that release. You never actually got to run around. You never actually got to do the performance. You were helping other people maximize their performance, which was super fun, but there was never that emotional release. And then to go connect with your teammates and have a great time and celebrate kind of the work you would put in. Again, so coaching can be very isolating. It's super rewarding profession for sure.
Yeah, especially if you love the sport and you love being around the sport, being able to help other people succeed in a sport that you had a successful career in is probably just rewarding in itself.
Yeah.
And being able to watch their personal growth and development as they progress throughout their career.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, sometimes it's hard because you're like, oh, just do it this way. But you got to remember you've seen the game and played in so many different iterations for decades, and it's not just that easy. I sometimes find that with parenting, it's like, oh, just do it this way. But they've never laid that track, and even if they had laid the track, they've done it like once. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about, Dad? Why would I do that?
That's an interesting comparison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in terms of, the Free Jacks, what do you kind of see as some of the, looking at the shorter term, some of the goals for the program? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish maybe over the next couple of years?
Yeah, we've been really pleasantly surprised and happy by the experiences our fans and supporters are having when they come to a match. Um, rugby is a pretty cool game. You're kind of on top of the action in the way Veterans Memorial Stadium is set up. It's kind of this visceral feeling you get watching rugby. There's kind of always action, but the really cool thing to see is that people new to the game are starting to embrace the behaviors of the game. And what I mean by that is New York's obviously our big rival. And there's a lot of, intensity around that rivalry. And when they come to town, they bring some fans, but our fans are sitting next to a New York person in a New York jersey, and they're still willing to buy each other a beer. And that's really cool to see, is that it's the purity of sport in that regard. And that's been really fun. It's cheeky. Everybody has, funny things to say to each other, but it's still fun. It's like the game is above all else. So that's been really cool to see. And our match day festivals are awesome. Typically there's a beer fest, there's concerts leading up to it, there's fireworks after, there's things for kids, there's things for grandma. And that's really cool. And it's really been fun to share that with people and see people like, wow, this is actually really cool. And by the way, it's affordable. I can bring a family of four, for under $100, and
That's nice.
food and drinks are street level pricing. And that's really awesome. And then they have a great experience, whether they want to tailgate and spend the whole day doing that and be a part of all of the curtain raisers and everything else, or they just want to come for that magical 2 hours. It's been really cool to see people have that experience, and we're just really looking forward to sharing that with a lot more people in the coming months. We start our season; it's a spring summer competition. It's basically kind of right after the Super Bowl, so call it President's Weekend to Father's Day weekend is the regular season. We typically, and we look to kind of frame it that our first home game is that leading into St. Patty's weekend. So that'll most likely be March 11th, 23. And then kind of every other weekend we're at home up until Father's Day, and then the playoffs start, and that typically ends mid-July, which is cool. Our TV ratings are surprisingly great for where we are, a lot further along than we thought. We own and operate, Major League Rugby has something called the rugbynetwork.com. So that's our free access to watch MLR and watch the Free Jacks anywhere in the world, including the United States. There's no blackouts, which is cool. But while that's happening, we're on a national game of the week on Fox Sports 1, and those TV ratings, those household numbers on average are kind of in the wheelhouse of NHL, a little higher than Major League Soccer. Granted, we don't have that as much volume, that we have 17 to 20 of those games on air a year relative to NHL, which is significantly larger. But we're suddenly seeing those type of eyeballs, which is really cool. And we're only kind of fourth, fifth year of Major League Rugby, so that's awesome to see. And we anticipate that'll continue to exponentially grow as more and more people get exposed to kind of our match festivals and the game itself.
Yeah, I feel like this is an exciting time because there's so much opportunity, with the sport. And I feel like you mentioned, there's something for everybody at these matches, and it gives people a reason to want to go. And affordability is huge because I know, people are, breaking those banks to go to Patriots games because those are not cheap. And it's like, if you have a family of four when you want to go to a Patriots game, that's a challenge. So being able to go to a sporting event that's more affordable, that has something for everybody that everybody would enjoy in the family if they do go, I feel like gives people more of an incentive to want to go to those matches. So I feel like it's a really exciting time to really be able to grow the sport now and gain interest in the Boston area, especially being in the Boston area. I feel like is a great location because it's a great sports city and people are so passionate about their teams. which I love. That's why I love being part of a Boston fan base. Everybody's so passionate about the teams. So I feel like it's a great city to have a team in and being able to just represent New England and represent that area because we really do love our teams.
Completely. And, and we're, very much standing on shoulders of giants. And you mentioned the Patriots. I mean, it's worth every penny to go to their games because they have a great product and it's a great experience and it's been fine tuned over the years. And it's fantastic to be a part of that ecosystem now, which is really cool. We're 8 miles from downtown Boston. We're right off the Red Line. So you can take the subway, the train's right there. 93, 95 are all right there. So it's quite accessible, which I think is really, really cool. And so we're just excited to see that continue to grow and, share this great game with our fellow New Englanders.
Well, that's great. I'm definitely going to have to check out some of the matches. Maybe I'll hit up Sean and be like,
maybe you're definitely going to come to a match. Come on. Yep. All of them.
Yeah, now I'm going to have to be, a regular member. I'm going to have to talk to Sean about this and go with him.
Absolutely. And every match has a different theme, so last year, the first one was St. Patty's, and that's kind of our heritage match, and the team wears green jerseys. It's very cool when normally, we're in the red, white, and blue. And, then we had an après rugby game, which was just hilarious. It was kind of like a hot tub time machine, but we literally had hot tub on the sideline. People could win to get into. It was super fun. People had cool ski garments. It was fun. And then that's how the whole season progresses. We had kind of a unicorn day, which was hilarious and fun. A derby day, a ska and jazz festival. Our salute to service was an awesome, magical weekend. We had Crusher Like Quint, kind of a shout out to our friends in the fishing industry. So there's some really cool theme games, and it kind of makes a lot of people come in costumes. There's costume contests. It's super fun.
Well, yeah, you definitely have me sold. I'm going to be attending for sure. Anybody else who's listening, highly recommend that you start going to the matches as well. We can all meet up at some of those matches. So if anybody's going, definitely let me know because I'll be there. So
can't you hear them? They're like, yes, we're going.
Woo! Yeah, I think you did a really good job of hyping this up. So
I don't even have to. People just have to show up, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Definitely now that I know, when the season's going to be starting, definitely going to look into some of these and become a regular attendee. So
yes, 100%.
I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast with me, talking more about this. This was great. It was really interesting to learn more about the game, the program, and definitely best of luck to you.
Thank you, Gabby. It was great to be on, and look forward to having you at a match this spring.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know when I'm there, so I can say hi.
Okay, awesome. And that's what we say. We say, "Let's ride." That's the Free Jacks. We say, "Let's ride" when we finish up things. So here we go.
Let's ride.
Let's ride. Perfect. Great.
Have a great rest of your week, everybody. I'll catch you all next time. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.